In 1872, the British conducted the first modern census in India. And when they got to Bengal province, they found something really weird. The eastern region, roughly what's now Bangladesh, was overwhelmingly Muslim, around 70% of the population. On the other hand, in the areas towards the west that roughly makes Indian state of West Bengal, the situation was exactly reverse. It had a majority Hindu population with Muslims making up a minority. One important thing to note here is that this was 1872, decades before partition that led to any large-scale migrations of people. So why was Bengal, one region speaking the same language, having the shared geography of being basin of large rivers like Ganga and Brahmaputra, split so dramatically between Hindus and Muslims? Different people from colonial times have grappled with an explanation for this, and people have arrived at 4 theories that keep propping up from time to time. First, religion of sword theory. This theory says that Islam is a religion of military conquest and people converted under pressure, of fear of militaries of different Muslim rulers that ruled Bengal for centuries before the British arrived.
One reason how Islamic population swelled in this country is they took hundreds and thousands of Hindu women and produced Muslim children out of them.
Second, immigration theory. In this view, the bulk of India's Muslims are descended from other Muslims who had either migrated overland from the Iranian plateau or sailed across the Arabian Sea.
They always like to claim their lineage to Muhammad Ghazni and Ghori and all these people, the Persian, high.
And they're not associated with them otherwise?
They are not.
Third, theory of social liberation. This theory states that the so-called lower caste suffered under the crushing burden of oppressive and tyrannical high caste in Hinduism. Then Islam arrived in the Indian subcontinent, carrying with it its liberating message of social equality, and the same caste converted en masse to escape the yoke of Brahmanic oppression.
So people who were part of low caste communities that faced oppression could adopt the Sayyid name and basically, reverse their position in society.
Fourth theory states that all Islamization can be traced back to politics of patronage. The view that Indians of the pre-modern period converted to Islam in order to receive some non-religious favor from the ruling class. For example, relief from taxes, promotion in the bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. Each theory has its own separate fan base. British colonial officials liked the religion of sword theory because it matched their ideas about Islam being violent from their experiences with Islamic conquests in Europe. Certain Hindu nationalist historians like R.C. Majumdar also embraced this theory. It helped portray Islam as a foreign and forceful influence on India. On the other hand, many elite Muslims in the 19th and 20th century preferred the immigration theory. For them, claiming ancestry from foreign Muslims felt more prestigious than admitting any local roots. It also helped them bolster their demand for a separate country if they could claim they have foreign roots. And today, in countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, a lot of thinkers and journalists often champion theories number 3 and 4. Emphasizing Islam's role in social equality or the material and pragmatic benefits of accepting the religion in pre-modern era. But which theory holds up under actual historical scrutiny? Or is there a fifth explanation that's been overlooked? Let's dig deeper and find out. Around the year 1200, a small group of Turkish men, disguised as horse traders, entered the city of Navdeep. Once inside, they swiftly rode to the palace gates and confronted the guards with drawn weapons. The local Hindu ruler, who had just sat down to dinner, hurriedly escaped through a back exit, fleeing with his attendants into the dense forest of Eastern Bengal, effectively abandoning his kingdom. That's simply how the Turks of Delhi Sultanate got their first firm foothold in Bengal. The coins struck by Khilji and his descendants in the beginning showed a Turkish cavalryman in full charge. This perhaps stood to be a symbol of power aimed towards the rural Bengalis who had perhaps never encountered Islamic symbols or Muslim idea of kingship before this. Yet centuries-old tradition don't just vanish overnight. Even 30 years after the initial conquest, historical records note that former rulers of the Sena dynasty occasionally re-emerge from hiding, accompanied by elephants and attendants and asserting their lingering legitimacy. In 1236, a Tibetan Buddhist pilgrim documented an encounter with 2 Turkish soldiers while crossing the Ganga river in Bihar. When they demanded gold from him, he defiantly threatened to report them to the local Hindu Raja, an assertion that nearly cost him his life. This incident highlights how decades after Turkish rule began, many locals still viewed Hindu rulers as the legitimate authority. Bengal was always a remote frontier for Delhi's rulers, and local governors periodically declared independence. In 1342, power shifted to a powerful noble named Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah. His descendants ruled Bengal independently for nearly 2 centuries before the arrival of Mughals. During this period, Bengal's coinage, architecture became distinctly local, reflecting its separation from Delhi. And by then, Islamic concepts of governance had firmly taken root in Bengal society. Yet an essential question remains: what proportion of Bengal's rural population had converted to Islam by this point? After 3 centuries of Muslim rule, but before Mughal dominance in the region. Different traveler accounts offer some clues. In 1345, the famous Moroccan traveler Ibn Batuta visits Sylhet to meet Shah Jalal, a renowned Sufi mystic. Batuta observed that while Shah Jalal and his immediate followers were Muslims, most local hill residents practiced some form of magic and rituals distinct from Islam. But he clearly mentions the people residing in the Surma plains below the hills of Sylhet to be practicing some form of idol worship. Later in the 15th century, the Chinese traveler Ma Huan journeyed from Chittagong to Sonargaon and Pandua. He explicitly mentions that Islam was confined largely to urban centers, leaving rural peasants largely untouched. However, this scenario began to change dramatically following the Mughal conquest that started around 1570. In April 1599, a Jesuit missionary named Francis Fernandez traveled up to the channel of East Bengal's Meghna River on an evangelizing tour, carefully noting the customs of the local people and evaluating prospects of converting them to Christianity. Reaching the rural districts near Narayanganj in southeastern Dhaka district, Fernandez recorded, "I started examining whether there were any chances of propagating the Christian religion, but I found that the people are nearly all Mohammedans." This is the earliest unambiguous reference to a Muslim peasantry in the heart of the Delta proper. From this point onward, numerous accounts confirm Islam's presence among rural populations in eastern Bengal. And after this, we get account after account that registers the presence of Islam among the peasantry in East Bengal. Yet a puzzle emerges here. The significant increase in Islamization in rural East Bengal seems to coincide with the Mughal rule, a regime historically documented as indifferent or even uninterested in actively converting its subject to Islam. What then explains this extensive Islamization during the Mughal period?
It is under siege today in the subcontinent, and it being weaponized by people in power for their own designs. It takes a lot of time and effort to bring and present these historical narratives in an engaging manner. Sometimes I have to read 2 or 3 full books to create a single video. This channel is a labor of love for me, but you can help me bring these stories to light by supporting me. I've opened memberships on my channel, and your small contribution could mean I could sustain the work I'm doing.
Before we explore what exactly happened during the Mughal period, let's quickly revisit whether the other theories we discussed earlier answer our central question. Religion of sword theory. This theory claims Islam spread mainly by force and coercion.
This Middle Eastern coloniality had its advent in India at the moment the first Muslim state was set up, that is the Delhi Sultanate in 1206.
But if that's true, then why didn't the forced conversion affect West Bengal, which remained predominantly Hindu? And what about northern India, where both the Delhi Sultanate and Mughal Empire were centered? Surely the force of military power would have converted the north far more extensively. Yet we don't see anything like the mass Muslim population of East Bengal elsewhere. So clearly this theory leaves many questions unanswered. Immigration theory. It's undeniable that many urban elites, the Ashraf class who ruled Bengal, had Persian, Afghan or Turkish ancestry. We also know that Arab traders visited Bengal's ports as early as 10th century. But this doesn't explain how vast rural populations turned Muslim.
कुछ पाकिस्तानी फैमिलीज हैं जैसे कि सैयद हो गए, कुरैशीज हो गए, हाशमीज हो गए, वो बहुत ज़्यादा क्लेम करते हैं अरब डिसेंट. मे बी कुछ के लिए वो ठीक हो भी या ना भी हो, मगर फॉर मेजॉरिटीज ऑफ पाकिस्तानी, जैसे मैंने डीएनए के तौर पे बताया, this tells a different story, or this does not tell the true story.
Ethnographic studies by British officials also found no significant physical differences between Muslims and Hindus in East Bengal. Clearly, most Bengali Muslims didn't descend from a small number of foreign migrants. Theory of social liberation. These are the counterfacts of this theory. Firstly, there is abundant evidence that Indian communities failed to improve their status in the social hierarchy upon Islamization.
अगरचे कश्मीर में मुसलमानों के बीच ज़ात पात का निज़ाम इतना सख्त और गिरा हुआ नहीं है जितना हिंदुओं में है, लेकिन इसका वजूद हकीकी है.
On the contrary, they simply carried into Muslim society the same birth ascribed rank that they had formerly known in Hindu society.
मेरी जो दादी थी वो दूसरी कास्ट से थी, वो छोटी जात से थी, लेकिन आज भी उन्होंने हमें एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया अगर देखा है.
Even Britishers noted this in East Bengal. In 1883, a British official named James Wipes observed that while in other parts of India, manual work is performed by outcast Hindus, but in Bengal, any repulsive or offensive occupation devolves on the Mohammedan. Also, this still does not answer if Brahmanical oppression was the cause, then why didn't the oppressed classes in the northern lands undergo the same process? Why are there no Indian states with 80 to 90% Muslim population like East Bengal? Fourth, politics of patronage. Marxist scholars often see this through a class-based lens, suggesting lower social groups adopted the language, culture and religion of ruling elites to gain economic benefits.
और कुछ इसलिए मुसलमान हो गए कि विजयी पक्ष के साथ रहने में फायदा होता है.
But this doesn't align with reality. The vast numbers of poor peasants in the East Bengal would never realistically have received direct patronage simply due to their religion. Under Mughal rule especially, the army and bureaucracy largely comprised Hindus, and there's no historical evidence the state rewarded people simply for becoming Muslim. In short, none of these theories alone can adequately explain the unique phenomenon in East Bengal. So let's revisit the Mughal period and search if there are clues to unravel this historical puzzle. The year is 1609. Picture Mughal officers gathered in a courtyard in Dhaka, standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to pledge their loyalty to the emperor. A man slowly moves down the line, holding two sacred objects, a copy of the Quran and a smooth black stone called Shaligram, revered by Hindus as a symbol of the god Vishnu. A Hindu officer steps forward, solemnly placing his hand upon the Shaligram to swear his allegiance. Next, a Muslim officer approaches, his palm gently resting upon the Quran as he makes his own vow. This is not fiction. This is a real event documented in a historical text called Bharistane-Gaibi from that period. What's remarkable is that what it tells us about the Mughal approach to governance. Religion wasn't a prerequisite for royalty to the Mughal Empire. Contrast this with their contemporaries in Turkey. The Ottoman sultans would routinely circumcise and convert young Christian boys from Greece and Serbia before incorporating them into their army units called Janissaries. So the two empires had totally different ideas of what constitutes loyalty. So far we have discussed why none of the four prevailing theories fully explain the Islamization of East Bengal, and our travel accounts indicate that a significant rural Muslim population in East Bengal emerged only after Mughal rule began. So Islam flourished in Bengal under an empire that had no interest in converting people to Islam. How do we make sense of this? Until now we have searched for answers within political and social factors. What if the real answer lies in an entirely different field of study? Geography. Yeah, it was geography that Islamized East Bengal. Let me tell you how. The Ganges Brahmaputra Meghna Delta is an extremely dynamic tide-influenced delta known for frequent shifts in river channels and abrupt course changes. Geologists have found that precisely after the Mughal period, the Ganga river altered its main course. It shifted significantly toward eastern channels such as the Padma river instead of its earlier western flow through channels like the Bhagirathi Hooghly. This eastward shift carried massive amounts of sediment and fresh water to East Bengal, greatly enriching the soil and making it exceptionally fertile for agriculture. Coincidentally, at this exact time, the Mughals gained control over large expanses of densely forested and thinly populated East Bengal. The primary Mughal objective in Bengal was to boost state revenues. To achieve this, they encouraged officials and settlers to clear forests and convert the land into productive rice farms. It was not like Mughal Faujdars were just picking and choosing Muslim pioneers for forest clearance over Hindu ones. In most of these grants, we find that Mughal Faujdars only confirmed agreements already concluded between local zamindars and the religious gentry of the area. Over time, rural communities began associating their newfound prosperity from agriculture with these pioneering settlers and adopted their religion. Many of the mosques and Shupi shrines built during this period became important cultural landmarks for times to come. In conclusion, the rapid Islamization of East Bengal resulted from the coincidence of two critical developments: the region's transformation into highly fertile agricultural land capable of sustaining growing populations, and the Mughal conquest, which actively encouraged settlers to create forests and establish farming communities.